through this morning and early to afternoon, we've talked about education, policy, agriculture, cricket, brilliant. We touched upon spirituality. I'm going to keep a little bit of my conversation restricted to the business context and the business domain. I've unfortunately spent some years, ma'am thinks long years, in the business domain, and share a little bit of our own experiences on what has made AI come alive in some of the work we've done with very visionary brands and businesses. And I do hope that that would stay with us when we wake up Monday morning on what we can do with what is a fascinating time we live in and a fascinating capability that is available to us. Before I start off, some housekeeping. I think I have to mention Google. Outside of Avin, all speakers so far have mentioned it, and there must have been a memo from the Machine Con folks that I probably missed. So I mentioned it and I'll keep it out. When we've engaged with brands and businesses, we've noticed 4 elements that have made the AI capability come alive. Through the course of this morning and afternoon, we've touched upon elements of this, and I'll try and draw from some of them and see if we can create some generalization that we can take away. The first is speed, which is the ability to react to an event in a meaningful time frame. It has 2 dimensions to it. One is responsiveness, which is timely. The second, of course, is that very often in the analytics context, if the response is not in a meaningful time frame, very often the opportunity will disappear. The opportunity to monetize, to create an impact, to intervene, to make a difference, will often disappear. It's because the opportunity is temporal in nature. And AI capabilities give us that power of speed when speed is important. We did talk of shallow and deep learning, and there are elements where it may not be. Like we'll have to wait for the task, we shouldn't predict before the task, and that was fascinating. The second is relevancy. One must react with speed, but without the context and the nuance, the response not only could be meaningless, you could be wildly off the mark. And relevancy gives us an opportunity to think about what is the next best action to be taken at this specific point in time, and what could be the potential impact of taking, and I agree with the earlier commonization of taking and not taking that specific action. So the power of relevancy into the context itself. The third is to be automated. It's not that I love or hate machines, but there are problems, challenges, situations we face which are very, very large scale in nature, require multiple nodes and elements of decisions to be taken, and Dr. Sarkar talked about it earlier, especially in the context of policy making. Decisions happen at very, very complex and multiple nodes. And very often in our own business environments, that situation is not very different. And how can I be able to optimize over very, very large scale and yet automate the decision in a manner that drives speed and then drives relevancy? The fourth element is just to be engaging, which is analytics as a body of knowledge and science has probably been around for a long time, right? From the time we tried to figure out uniform sizes for the Second World War to where we are today. We've come a very long way, which is not necessarily to say that it has been federated, institutionalized within every business decision that we take in our offices, in our workplaces. The opportunity that AI provides is to convert that analytics to be engaging, to allow a right brain manager to leverage left brain capability, bring it together in a manner that he could use information, data, insights, even when he's bringing his intuition and judgment to the table. I will talk about this a little bit more as we go along, but the opportunity to make it engaging, and sure, Dr. Prithvis, if I can drive that through thought as opposed to action, even more fascinating. I'll touch upon two examples that we've encountered. Both are probably things that might resonate with us. One is something that many of us have aspired towards. The other is something that I think a lot of us wish for. And I'll probably touch upon both of them. The first is in the context of banking, financial services, insurance. I do gather there are a lot of bankers and insurers here with us. And the opportunity to drive personalization between customer transactions. I've been in the personalization space myself for an interesting period of time. And I've seen the space and capabilities evolve as we've come along. The science has been around. What the cusp at which we find ourselves today is probably the ability to bring three things together. One is history itself, and that body of knowledge has been around, whether on clustering or any form of understanding customer behavior. Increasingly, the nuance of customer behavior has moved to personas, which is manifest behavior is altered in the face of context. A context impacts the persona that I demonstrate with a brand when I engage with a brand based on my proclivities in the past and the nuances that I find myself in. The third dimension is environment. You've talked of macro and micro environment. There is also social and societal environment that impact consumer decisions. I find myself in a place where I can interestingly bring these three things together. So between the first transaction that a customer has had with a bank and the second transaction that the customer may have, that transaction may be, sir, to you, probabilistic or deterministic, the customer will go through a journey. 75 million customers go through 75 million potentially unique journeys. Through each of those journeys, the customer engages with the bank in 7, 10, 12, 15 different ways. I can walk into a bank, I can log into a website, we've talked about the prevalence of bots and chats, I can engage on a kiosk, I can of course call the call center, and so on and so forth. There are multiple ways in which I can engage with the bank as a customer. Some engagements are proactive, some engagements are reactive. And now these 75 million customer journeys become nuanced by each of those customer touch points. Now the challenge I'm faced with is a challenge of synchronicity. When my customer engages with me as a brand and when I engage with the customer as a brand, what is the opportunity for me to have a meaningful, relevant, yet synchronous conversation? How do I understand how the customer is bouncing across channels? How do I understand where the intent of the customer has changed over time from research and evaluation to a potential intent to buy, to where do I want to engage with this brand as a transactional entity or potentially as a friend? And we often talk of brands being friends to consumers, and that's very wishful until such point where I can have continuous, meaningful, relevant conversations with customers. And many of our AI capabilities today allow me to have this synchronous, relevant conversation across every potential digital or physical channel. I have an element here called shopping around, which is fundamentally an element of listening to signals. Right? As I engage with my customer, I may also be able to listen to signals. A signal could be a manifest, a signal could be an intent, a signal could be an impute. How am I able to understand is there an opportunity for me to understand what my customer is doing outside of engagements which are in my domain? That could be from social signals, that could be from partner signals, that could be from other feeds such as news. And we today here are responding to signals that came a couple days ago from probably 10,000 miles away. How do I understand the nuance of these signals and its impact on the decision that the customer is going to make? AI helps me bring these three elements together in a manner that I can be timely, relevant, and contextual. I'm going to take this to a slightly different domain and probably put myself at the center as a business manager. I took an example of of pricing and large deal pricing, and I borrowed this from one of our engagements, so I'll try to generalize this, which is, how does AI help me as a manager when I'm taking decisions? And I'd like to believe that fundamentally, I may not have a quantitative background, but I have an analytical mind. And that's probably true for a brand manager and a marketing manager. It's probably true for a person managing supply chain and operations, which is fundamentally, as human beings, we are analytical in nature. We like to have a structured method of arriving at our decisions. But yes, very often we bring our gut to the table. In my first job within marketing, my manager told me, if you have a gut feeling, go to the loo. Which is, when we are taking a decision, in how many ways can I bring a flavor of quantitative element, a flavor of measurability, outcome and impact to the decision I'm taking. In the context of pricing, which is typically in the domain of probably finance managers, I might extend it. We had a conversation about risk earlier, and the context are probably similar. You take decisions based on a range of structured information, so you understand revenue, you understand margin, you understand profitability, you understand trends, and then you arrive at a pricing decision. Very often, the same deal manager is also looking at a whole set of judgment variables. Is this a must-win customer? Is this a great competitive opportunity? Am I in a situation where acquisition of this particular deal might significantly open up a new product market or a new geographic opportunity? Am I at the end of my quarter or end of my week and month where a turnaround in this deal can flip my revenue and profitability trends very differently, which is a range of judgment calls to what is otherwise a quantitative decision. We as managers very often face this, right? And I do believe people in the domain of marketing and brand would like, in as much, their judgments to be based on as much of quantitative capability as qualitative judgment, history, and experience. And we've had the opportunity to work with intelligent assistants, make these intelligent assistants as engaging, as I talked about it earlier, as possible to the business manager, which is the ability to look at a range of historic data, a range of past similar behaviors, and bring to bear for the manager the impact of various judgment decisions that have been taken over time, which means every decision has had an impact. Managers across the company, and this is a global organization, so the context is across multiple countries, multiple product lines, multiple nuances. Each decision has had an outcome, and I'm taking a decision today. In what form can I pull all of that, what is otherwise tribal knowledge residing within the company, to guide me to take the call that I have to take? I'm anyway taking a call. The judgment is mine, potentially the risks are mine. But here is a system that can guide me and in so many ways attempt to either break down or quantify a judgment call that I'm taking. And there are many ways in which we can make this extremely immersive. We talked of conversations, we talked of voice. There are a range of other senses that can be brought in. There's touch, there's feeling, and I said before, I love for thought to be brought into the conversation, which is for an otherwise very creative, intuitive business manager that many of us are, the ability to have a pervasive system, I call it an assistant, which is possibly trivializing it, to guide me through my decision process. So two very diverse examples that we've experienced working with very leading organizations that help bring AI as a capability real, pervasive, and I often tend to call it federated, which means at every point of decision, at every point of interaction, at every point of context, the capability can come to bear, can drive an impact. I took the liberty of putting a bit of framework, which is how can I, when I bring this to Monday morning conversations, how can I have an outside-in perspective to how I will address these situations? Many of these conversations are transformational. We try to understand how we can look at digital trends and how they impact our businesses, and how can we take advantage of digital technologies, digital customers, digital trends to be ahead of the curve, ahead of our competitors. Try to look at those situations, and those situations might broadly fall into three buckets. There's the conversation about enhancing customer experience. There are contexts about driving operational effectiveness. That could be revenue, cost, people, resources we talked of. There could be opportunities to completely rethink product design, product delivery, service delivery. Look at how our functions engage with them. Very often, transformational conversations could be within function, but more often than not, they are cross-functional, and the opportunity to look at how cross-functional impact of information analytics, process design can impact an outcome, and then see which of the 4 kinds of AI frameworks we talked of, or a mix of them, is most relevant to bear, is most interesting to harness to drive the impact that we're looking for.